My sugar daddy took me to a banquet, and I ended up in a fool brawl with his first love. He yanked me out of the chaos. With my hair in a tangled mess, I glared at him coldly. Are you taking sides? He said nothing. I took off the ring and threw it in his face. I'm the one breaking up with you. I've been Jonathan Brooks' kept woman for 3 years. He's got the looks, the money, and he knows how to spoil someone. He's never stingy with me. And his only rule is that I'm not allowed to take kissing scenes. For him, I've turned down quite a few roles and been called pretentious and fake by people in the industry. But I didn't care. I've always been practical, never one to drag trouble his way if I can help it. Even so, I never imagined that the first time I caused trouble, it would be such a colossal mess. I got into a fight with his newly returned first love. It all started when Jonathan asked me to attend a high society banquet with him. I've never felt at home in their elite circle. I was ready to decline, but after 3 months away filming, I hadn't seen him. Since he made the effort to invite me, I agreed. Unsurprisingly, I ran into the last person I wanted to see. I tried my best to avoid them. But they clearly didn't want to leave me alone. I had just stepped out to the garden for some air when Evelyn Cross and Cecilia Trent followed me. Evelyn was Jonathan's childhood sweetheart. Years ago, her family business took her overseas, and she'd only recently returned. Cecilia was my nemesis. A woman had spent years spreading rumors, buying smear campaigns, and dragging me through trending scandals. I never expected them to know each other. Ignoring them, I stayed seated on the bench, making no move. Cecilia crossed her arms and sneered. Isn't this Sam's engagement party? Since when could just anyone show up? Evelyn glanced at me, her tone indifferent. You dragged me out here. If you've got something to say, just say it. Cecilia grinned ingratiatingly. Don't rush, Evelyn. It was too stuffy inside. So I thought we could talk out here. Evelyn didn't respond. She leaned lightly against the fountain. Cecilia's voice carried on, syrupy sweet. Evelyn, are you and Jonathan getting engaged soon? It's almost finalized, Evelyn replied casually. That's wonderful. A perfect match, made in heaven. Some people should take the hint and know when to bow out gracefully. Evelyn said nothing. But Cecilia kept chattering away. I wasn't interested in listening and got up to leave, but her next words froze me in my tracks. Some people not only disgrace themselves, but drag their families down too. Remember that construction project that went wrong? How many workers lost their jobs? Honestly, the guy in charge losing his leg felt like karma. I swerved on my heel and walked straight up to her, slapping her across the face twice. Cecilia clutched her cheek and glared. Sophia, are you insane? I sneered. Gossiping behind my back is one thing, but saying it to my face? Did you really think I wouldn't fight back? Evelyn frowned. Sophia, this is the Smith estate. You're going too far. I stared her down, my gaze sharp. Evelyn, if someone said that about your parents, would you tolerate it? She faltered, unable to respond. But Cecilia grabbed my hair, and we ended up wrestling. I didn't even notice when Evelyn joined the fray, but by the time Jonathan showed up, the three of us were in an all-out brawl. With a dark expression, he pulled me out of the mess. I looked disheveled and pathetic, while Evelyn stood almost completely unscathed. I glared at him and asked coldly, "Are you taking sides?" He frowned deeply, saying nothing. Without hesitation, I ripped the ring off my finger and threw it at his face. I'm the one breaking up with you. With that, I stormed out of the banquet hall, got into the first cab that stopped, and slammed the door shut. But the moment I sat down, the tears started falling uncontrollably. The overwhelming wave of frustration and humiliation crashed over me, drowning me completely. Yesterday, my new movie had just wrapped filming. I came to see him full of excitement, only to be humiliated within moments. And worse, he sided with someone else. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, Jonathan's name flashing across the screen again and again. I picked up, cutting him off before he could speak. The house at Seaside Haven is under my name. You have 1 week to move out." Before he could respond, I hung up and promptly blocked him on every possible platform. That bastard. We're done. I didn't return to Seaside Haven but checked into a random hotel instead. After taking a shower, I finally calmed down enough to start realizing how absurd the whole situation was. A kept woman kicking out her benefactor? I might be the first in history. Thinking back, I'd become bolder and bolder with Jonathan. When we first met, I was so careful, walking on eggshells and tiptoeing around him. Our first meeting was at a party. My agent had dragged me there to curry favor with a few prominent directors and investors. Back then, my family's situation was decent until my father's construction project went south. He not only lost a leg but also poured all our savings into compensating the workers, leaving us buried in debt. While my parents were consumed with worry, I tried to help make ends meet. That's when a talent scout tricked me into signing a predatory contract with a shady company. No resources, no future, just endless drinking and schmoozing with industry big shots. I had no way to terminate the contract and could only feign illness or play dumb to dodge the events. But that night, I couldn't get out of it. When I pushed open the door to the private lounge, I saw a group of middle-aged men seated around the table. Jonathan sat at the head, his cool and aloof demeanor setting him apart from the rest. The moment I stepped inside, he was already preparing to leave. In a panic, I hurried after him. "Sir, can I walk out with you?" He towered over me, looking down with an air of detached amusement. "Why? Do I look approachable?" Jonathan was clearly the least approachable person in the room. But I couldn't say that. I shook my head, answering earnestly, "Because you're the most good-looking." He chuckled softly. "I know." Sensing his impatience, I blurted out another line, "And you look like the kindest one." He raised an eyebrow, a faint, mocking smile on his lips. "Then you've misjudged." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me to be dragged back into the room by my agent. They forced me to drink glass after glass. A director with a bloated, greasy face started groping me, his hand sliding onto my thigh as I struggled to break free, accidentally knocking over a wine glass in the process. He slapped me hard across the face and cursed me for being ungrateful. Then he reached for my clothes. Panicking, I grabbed a shard of the broken wine glass from the floor and stabbed it into his leg. Afterward, I collapsed on the floor, trembling with fear, convinced I was about to go to jail. That's when the door swung open and Jonathan appeared. He scanned the room, taking in the scene. The director, who had been screaming like a slaughtered pig, immediately fell silent. "Didn't you want to leave with me?" Jonathan said, his tone calm but commanding. "What are you waiting for?" I dropped the shard, stumbling to my feet and throwing myself into his arms. My entire body was shaking, and I could barely stand as he carried me out of there. Jonathan brought me back to Seaside Haven. That night, I took an early shower but stayed hidden in the bathroom for a long time, too scared to come out. I could hear him on the phone outside, likely dealing with the fallout from the evening's events. When the call ended, I mustered up the courage to wrap myself in a towel and step out. He was lounging on the sofa, his white shirt partially unbuttoned, revealing a perfectly sculpted collarbone. I walked up to him, took a deep breath, and yanked off the towel, though I didn't dare lift my head to look at him. He stood, picked up the towel, and draped it back over me with a teasing smile. "You're young, but you've got guts." My face flushed red with embarrassment. I stammered, I don't know what got into me today, I'm sorry." "Calm down. Now, look at me." Clutching the towel tightly, I summoned the courage to lift my head. Jonathan gazed at me intently, his expression calm, but his eyes held a trace of mischief, a mix of allure and danger. "You trust me that much? Aren't you afraid I could be worse than them?" My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly scrambled for a flattering reply. "No, handsome people are always kind." He chuckled, a low, rich sound, then pulled me into his arms and leaned down to kiss me. It was my first kiss, and my mind went completely blank. It felt like a soft yet overwhelming force swept me away entirely. His thumb gently grazed my lips as he murmured in a low, magnetic voice, "Go to sleep now." Think you can sleep alone? I nodded in a daze. What's this? His tone rose slightly at the end, a hint of danger in his voice. So perfunctory? I threw my arms around him, whispering, I can't, I'm scared. I want to sleep holding you. Satisfied, he tucked me into bed, then left the room to take a 30-minute phone call before coming back to hold me as we fell asleep. Over the next few days, I kept checking the news online. But there wasn't a single whisper about what had happened. A week later, my unfair contract with the company was terminated. Jonathan had arranged a new management company for me and assigned me an experienced agent. As for that director, he completely disappeared from the industry. For the past 3 years, every opportunity Jonathan found for me was carefully curated, never careless or second-rate. I went from an unknown nobody to a rising actress with growing recognition. The family debts were all paid off, and my parents returned to our hometown to open a restaurant, finally settling into a stable life. But only I knew the truth, I wasn't doing as well as I appeared to be because I had fallen deeper and deeper. Jonathan was my benefactor. Yet I couldn't stop myself from seeing him as my lover. When did I fall for him? I couldn't say for sure. Loving Jonathan was simply too easy. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a series of missed calls from my agent, Lily. My phone screen showed hundreds of missed calls. A sinking feeling hit me as I called her back. Lily's booming voice rang through the line, instantly shaking off my grogginess. Oh my God, you finally picked up. It's chaos. Do you even know what's happening? What happened last night? What did you do? Still half asleep, I opened the news while holding the phone and froze. Sophia fights Cecilia. Sophia get out of showbiz. A video of my argument with Cecilia from the night before had been leaked online. But the clip was heavily edited, leaving only the seconds where I charged at her and hit her. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and explained everything to Lily: the context, the fight, and the fact that Jonathan and I were officially done. After all, I had no one to clean up the mess for me anymore. Lily went quiet for a moment before sighing. Take the next few days to rest and stay away from the news. I'll figure something out. After hanging up, I carefully rewatched the video. The footage had been shot from a hidden angle, clearly premeditated. Even Evelyn, who had been standing nearby, was cropped out. The video showed only Cecilia and me. The comments were overwhelmingly negative. Sophia's sharp and mean look says it all. Of course she's capable of hitting someone. Did she really think no one would dare expose her? I heard she has a sugar daddy. Otherwise, with her awful acting skills, how could she land so many roles? Insider info. She's just a stand-in for some big shot's real love. Now that the main one's back, she's been kicked out. They stand in? I couldn't help but laugh coldly at the idea. Cecilia was steering public opinion again, but this time I didn't feel much. As a public figure, being dragged through the mud was inevitable. As long as they didn't involve my family, they could say whatever they wanted. As for the stand-in claim, it was utter nonsense. I remembered when Jonathan and I first got together, he treated me so well that it unsettled me. Once, after a dinner party, Jonathan came to pick me up. Emboldened by alcohol, I couldn't help but ask, "Do I remind you of someone you used to know?" Pulling me into his arms, he flicked my forehead lightly. "Have you been acting for so long you've started confusing yourself? A stand-in? I don't play that game." Pushing my luck, I asked, "Do you have anyone else, then?" He chuckled dismissively. "Do I look like I have time for that?" That answer made me happy for a long while. Jonathan might not truly love me. Maybe I was just a novelty to him, or maybe he simply couldn't be bothered to replace me. It didn't matter. At least in the years we'd been together, there had never been a third party. I could handle not being loved or chosen wholeheartedly. But I couldn't tolerate losing the last shred of my dignity. Due to the sudden wave of bad press, all my scheduled appearances were cancelled. I holed up in the hotel for days, too scared to go out. I wasn't just paranoid about haters, they could be dangerous. 2 years ago, I played a stunningly beautiful yet deranged villain. Netizens praised my performance, saying my acting was so explosive it didn't feel like acting at all. What I didn't expect was that some people would equate the role with my real character. During that period, I injured my leg, and someone took advantage of the situation by throwing a hornet's nest at me, trying to ruin my face. Thankfully, Jonathan arrived in time. He used his custom-made suit, a suit worth tens of thousands, to swat away the hornets. The suit was completely ruined. Thinking about it now, I shook my head, trying to dispel the memory. Why was I thinking about him again? Picking up my phone, I scrolled through my missed calls and messages. Words of comfort and encouragement from friends filled my inbox. But there was nothing from Jonathan. That's when I remembered I'd blocked him, cutting off all means of contact. Frustrated, I tossed my phone aside. He was so resourceful. If he really wanted to find me, he would have. If he didn't reach out, it just meant he didn't care. Sitting by the window, I couldn't help but feel conflicted and self-indulgent. I knew there was no future, yet I still clung to a shred of hope. Somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that he cared for me, at least a little. After all, he had once braved a New Year's Eve snowstorm to be with me. On my first New Year's Eve with Jonathan, I had to stay at Seaside Haven due to a packed schedule, unable to return home. That night, I was half asleep when I heard the sound of the door opening. Startled, I sprang out of bed, grabbed a table lamp, and cautiously cracked open the door. Jonathan stood at the entrance, snowflakes dusting his shoulders. Noticing the lamp in my hand, he raised an eyebrow and smirked. Interesting way to welcome someone. I tossed aside the lamp and leapt into his arms. I wanted to ask why he'd suddenly come over, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I tried for a more casual tone. How is it that every time I think about you, you show up? He scooped me up and carried me to the bedroom, chuckling softly in my ear. Let me see where you were thinking about me. Outside, the wind howled relentlessly, but inside, the warmth was all-encompassing. While he went to shower, I leaned against the headboard, the drowsiness soon overtaking me. Half asleep, I felt him approach, slipping a small gift under my pillow and pressing a light kiss to my forehead. Happy New Year, Sophia, he whispered. That was a New Year's Eve without my parents, yet I didn't feel lonely at all. After 3 days holed up in the hotel, I thought about going out for some air and picking up a few things. But Lily's flurry of messages quickly put an end to that plan. The scandal about me hitting Cecilia had been brewing for days without dying down. And now fresh dirt had surfaced. The director I'd once injured had come forward to accuse me. He claimed I'd tried to exchange favors for opportunities and then abandoned him when I secured a new benefactor. He didn't dare name my so-called benefactor, but he spun a compelling narrative of being blacklisted and ostracized, mixing lies with just enough truth to sound credible. He even presented evidence that seemed damning. Lily was overwhelmed, unable to contain the fallout alone. Sophia, can't you reach out to Jonathan? She pleaded. Just swallow your pride and ask him for help. This is the kind of thing he could fix with a snap of his fingers. I stayed silent, feeling a sudden sting behind my eyes. False rumors like these weren't new to me. But in the past, they'd always been squashed before they could gain traction. This time, though, they had spiraled out of control. In a low voice, I murmured, he won't help me anymore. He's going to marry Evelyn. Breaking up with him was exactly what he wanted. Lily sighed. If this isn't handled properly, you might not work in this industry for a very long time. It's fine, Lily. I'll release a statement soon to clear things up. Whether people believe it or not, that's up to them. I'm done trying to prove myself. Thank you for everything. Truly. I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess. Lily tried to reassure me, promising to do her best, but I knew the situation had already spiraled beyond repair. I glanced at the news. The comment sections were a cesspool of hostility. Why hasn't this problematic actress been banned yet? Disgusting. Heard she got where she is by cozying up to a benefactor. No way she made it on talent alone. Looks like her benefactor has ditched her. Probably got bored. Wasn't there a rumor about the benefactor having a first love? Maybe she was the other woman all along. A few comments spoke in my defense, but they were quickly drowned out by the tide of negativity. I logged into my social media account and began typing out a statement. Hello, everyone. This is Sophia. I sincerely apologize for taking up public resources due to my personal matters. Now that things have escalated, I hope everyone can discern the truth. First, I have no relationship whatsoever with director David Hand. The rumors about any collusion are completely baseless. When I first entered the entertainment industry, I was young and naive, signing an unfair contract out of ignorance. At the time, my manager forced me into situations I wasn't comfortable with, including attending drinking parties. Director Han tried to take advantage of me during one such incident. I defended myself with a shard of glass and managed to escape. Because he failed to exploit me, he turned his attention to other newcomers. I don't know how many innocent girls have suffered at his hands. But I managed to save 2 of them myself. What I shared wasn't meant to seek sympathy, but to help everyone see the true face of scum like him. To the girls I saved, you don't need to speak out for me. This kind of mess isn't worth revisiting. Secondly, I urge everyone to direct all your malice at me and leave my family out of it. They've done nothing wrong. If you can't hold your tongue, I sincerely hope your hateful words rebound on you. Lastly, I've never been a mistress, nor have I been anyone's substitute. Mr. Brooks and I have officially broken up. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I kept the statement as neutral as possible, avoiding the most damaging details. After posting it, I turned off my phone. Leaning against the window seat, I felt an overwhelming exhaustion, despite having done nothing at all. At some point, I fell asleep and had a dream. It took me back to when my career had just begun to rise. Lily had secured a role for me in a promising film. Though it was only a supporting part, the character was highly appealing. Riding the momentum, she arranged for me to appear on variety shows and shoot commercials. During one dinner meeting with potential investors, I ran into an old acquaintance, director David Hand. He had transitioned from directing to producing and even changed his name. That evening, as I passed by his private room, I saw a girl stumble out, her clothes disheveled and face pale. I immediately shielded her and raised my phone at him. "What do you think you're doing?" The girl whispered, "There's another one still inside." I helped her out of there. And when David saw Jonathan standing behind me, he stopped in his tracks, unwilling to push further. I knew stepping in might cause trouble for Jonathan. If he chose to stay out of it, I'd likely be left to face the fallout alone. But at that moment, I couldn't bring myself to hesitate. If I hadn't seen it, I couldn't have done anything. But having witnessed it and looking the other way would haunt me for the rest of my life. Later, I heard that the 2 girls I'd saved decided to leave the entertainment industry altogether. When I told Jonathan about it, I expected a scolding. Instead, he just chuckled and said, "Looks like you've grown some backbone." Then he gave me a warning: "Don't take risks like that alone next time. Cornered dogs can bite." I was a little shaken by the incident. But his words filled me with an inexplicable sense of courage, a courage that seemed to come entirely from him. In the early days of my acting career, I had no name, no status, and few people even knew about my relationship with Jonathan. On set, I was often bullied as a newcomer. I chose to stay quiet, reasoning that a few harsh words wouldn't hurt me. Once, Jonathan came to visit me on set and overheard some of the treatment I was enduring. He immediately called over the production assistant who'd been berating me and, turning to me, said, "Yell back at them." At first, I was too embarrassed to speak, so he started for me, giving me an opening. Slowly, I found my voice, and as the words poured out, my anger built. Before I knew it, I was shouting so fiercely that Jonathan had to pull me away. Later, he watched me with a satisfied smile, clearly pleased that I'd finally stood up for myself. "What were you planning to do? Bottle it up and cry about it later? I'm not going to be here every day. If someone insults you or picks on you, you fight back. And if you can't handle it, tell me. I've never let anyone wrong you. Why would you go out there and let yourself be mistreated?" Back then, Jonathan's eyes were bright and full of life, his sharp features glowing with an almost radiant confidence. It was in that moment that I felt my heart tear open, spilling out an uncontrollable flood of love for him. My wandering thoughts were abruptly pulled back to the present by Lily's phone call. When I woke up, I realized my face was damp, as if I'd been crying in my sleep. Wiping away the tears, I answered the call, only to hear Lily's unmistakable excitement spilling through. "Babe, have you totally misunderstood your relationship with Jonathan?" Still groggy, I asked, "What do you mean? Have you not been online? Go check your social media." Jonathan personally clapped back at those haters. "He's so freaking hot, I can't stand it. If he proposes to you, you have to say yes. I'm begging you. You two need to be together forever." And with that, she hung up on me, leaving me completely baffled. I hurriedly opened my social media account, only to find that the trending topics had completely shifted. Sophia sponsored Jonathan takes on haters. Jonathan is irresistible. Jonathan is the best man ever. Underneath was my statement from yesterday. The top comment, with thousands of likes, sat smugly at the very top. "You've got time to post statements online, but no time to unblock me? Break up? Nice move, Sophia." And next to Jonathan's name? The official, verified Brooks Group account. Reading the comment, a chill ran down my spine. I could vividly picture Jonathan grinding his teeth as he typed it. Scrolling further through the trending topics revealed Jonathan's warpath. His achievements in battling the haters were laid out in plain view. "Hater, this woman's shameless, stringing men along. How dare she block Jonathan? Jonathan, what? Jealous she didn't block you instead? Hater, she seduced her way to the top and blamed Director Hand for misconduct. Look at her, does she even deserve it? Jonathan, why don't you let me look at you first? Hater, even if she's telling the truth about the scandal, didn't she attack Cecilia and bully her colleagues? Jonathan, I told her to. Got a problem? Take it up with me. Hater, and now she's breaking up? As if Jonathan would actually marry her. He was just having fun. Jonathan, if I'm not marrying her, am I supposed to marry you?" As I read through the exchanges, I couldn't help but laugh, though a growing sense of unease crept in. Jonathan's blatant, high-profile defense of me felt like he was dragging all my secrets into the spotlight, leaving me utterly exposed. Hater, this account's way too active. Must be a fake one Sophia bought. Jonathan. Green Summit Tower. Tell the front desk your username and come to my office for a chat. Hater, I don't care. Sophia's disgusting, trashy, shameless. Jonathan, assistant sussy, find all their information in 10 minutes. The storm Jonathan stirred up turned the entire internet upside down. The haters were silenced one by one, and eventually, the comment section fell into an eerie hush. Meanwhile, my supporters and Jonathan's fans were celebrating loudly, Jonathan protecting his woman so hot it's unreal. To all those waiting to watch Sophia fall, how's that slap in the face? If these two have kids, just imagine how insanely gorgeous they'd be. I couldn't help laughing out loud as I read through the comments. But just as I felt the corners of my lips twitch upward, a new notification appeared in my comment section. Open the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Panic-stricken, I dropped my phone and rushed to the peephole. Sure enough, there he was, Jonathan, standing right outside my door. My heart was pounding as I fumbled clumsily with the lock. When I finally got the door open, Jonathan looked down at me, as impossibly handsome as ever. I opened my mouth to speak, but tears betrayed me, streaming down uncontrollably. I could only stand there, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. Jonathan froze for a moment, then gently wiped the tears from my face, his touch soft even as his words were anything but kind. "I haven't even said anything, and you're already crying? You've really mastered this whole emotional blackmail thing, haven't you?" As he spoke, he tugged me into the apartment and sat down on the sofa. I stole a glance at him, secretly feeling a bit happy. But old habits die hard. I couldn't help retorting, "Why are you here?" He tossed his suit jacket aside and began rolling up his sleeves. "Let's talk about this whole favoritism nonsense first." The mention of that word reignited my irritation. I deliberately scooted farther away from him and muttered under my breath, "You're biased, plain and simple. What's there to talk about?" Jonathan let out a cold chuckle. Biased? And when have I ever been biased against you? You were going at it like a prizefighter, and Cecilia's nails were this close to clawing your face off. If I hadn't dragged you out, your pretty little face would have been ruined. You cry all day over a single pimple. If Shed scratched you, wouldn't you have bawled hard enough to flood the whole house? I froze, caught completely off guard by his explanation. For a moment, I felt guilty. But I wasn't ready to admit defeat. Then why didn't you just say so back then? Jonathan snorted again. Was it me not saying it, or you not listening? By the time I ran after you, you'd already bolted out of sight. I wish you were this quick to run to me when I'm the one looking for you. And now you're kicking me out? Sophia. I think you might be the first person to throw out their sponsor halfway through the arrangement. I was losing my confidence, but I still stubbornly held my ground. Well, you didn't come looking for me these past few days. And when I was being cyberbullied, you didn't do anything. You're clearly busy arranging a marriage. So why bother coming here now? I'm not about to be anyone's mistress. Jonathan suddenly yanked me toward him, gripping my chin firmly. His voice dropped low, dangerously soft. Who told you I was getting married? Are the resources I've given you not good enough? Or are the gifts I've given you too cheap, that you think I need to trade my marriage for favors? But that's what everyone's been saying. You listen to everyone else, but you won't listen to me? Do you have any trust in me at all? I pulled back, breaking free from his grip. You still haven't explained where you've been these past few days. Jonathan looked at me, then let out a soft sigh. I was in Germany on a business trip. A project there collapsed, so I went to take over. As for Cecilia, I didn't handle her right away because I knew she'd gotten involved with David. I was waiting for her to leak her own story, made it easier to take them all down at once. And these last few days, I was worried about those trolls causing trouble for you. I had bodyguards stationed near your hotel. He leaned back, his tone calm. Anything else you want to ask? Go ahead, get it all out now. I pressed my lips together, hesitating before finally voicing the question that had been gnawing at me. Will you marry me? Or do you just want me to stay as your mistress? Jonathan fell silent. In that instant, my heart sank like a stone. Then he said, are those two things mutually exclusive? If you want to stay, stay. If you want to leave, leave. When have I ever stopped you from doing what you wanted? I lowered my head, whispering, but the couple rings I picked, you've never worn yours. Jonathan reached for his suit jacket, discarded on the side, and pulled out 2 rings from the left chest pocket. The rings were something ID stumbled upon while walking the red carpet in Cannes. They weren't from any brand, just handmade pieces crafted by an elderly woman selling them by the roadside. They weren't expensive, but they were utterly unique. I fell in love with them at first sight and bought them right away. Since then, I'd worn mine constantly. But Jonathan? Not once. I didn't wear it because you didn't want our relationship to go public, he said, his tone calm. And these rings are so special that I kept them in my pocket instead. As he spoke, he stood and walked over to me, his intense gaze locking onto mine. I wasn't sure if you wanted to get married, so I tried to gauge your reaction by subtly bringing you to engagement parties, he admitted. If you're not ready, we can wait another 2 years. But what do? You vent all your frustrations on me instead. You're polite enough to everyone else, but why are you so harsh with me? His voice grew deeper and softer with each word. When I looked up, I found myself caught in the burning tenderness in his eyes. Jonathan pulled me into his arms and gently patted my back, his voice coaxing and warm. Don't act out anymore. Be good. I hugged him back, murmuring a soft okay. A swirl of emotions rose in my heart, complex and difficult to pin down. It dawned on me, only belatedly, how much his indulgence over the years had spoiled me. His love had planted within me a deep possessiveness. So much so that even the faintest hint of him favoring someone else was unbearable. I had to admit it, I'd been taking his love for granted. The next morning, I received a message from Lily. Not only had my previously paused schedule resumed as normal, but I'd also received several new business offers. I couldn't resist sneaking another look at social media, where the trending topics were all about the aftermath of Jonathan's dramatic open-the-door moment. The PR team had successfully shifted public focus toward my rumored relationship with Vincent. For now. None of the previous scandals had been addressed. It seemed they were waiting for the right timing. Jonathan and I returned to Seaside Haven, walking hand in hand without a care. In the past, I would have worried about keeping a low profile, but now, it felt unnecessary. A few people took photos as we walked, but the atmosphere was friendly, and Jonathan didn't seem to mind. I thought the events of last night were behind us. But when we got home, he hit me with an unexpected twist. Everything of his clothes, watches, accessories, toiletries was gone. Completely gone. For a moment, I didn't even realize what had happened. I thought the house had been robbed and couldn't help wondering why the thief had only taken his things and left mine untouched. Jonathan stood off to the side, watching me with an amused, knowing smile. "You told me to move out within a week, didn't you? How could I dare disobey? Who knows when my stuff might have ended up dumped on the street? After all, this house isn't mine. I didn't pay rent, so what right do I have to stay here?" Listening to his words, I wanted the ground to swallow me up. Clearly, his moving out was just a ploy to make the house feel empty, so I'd have no choice but to beg him back. This was all part of his plan to tease me. Knowing I was in the wrong, I clung to his sleeve and sweet-talked him into moving back in. By that afternoon, all his belongings were back in their rightful place. To show my sincerity, I took it upon myself to reorganize his ties by color and neatly arrange them into categories. I felt like a perfect little secretary. Jonathan went to the office while I stayed home watching talk shows. After all, I'd soon be a guest on one myself. I never expected to receive a call from Evelyn, inviting me to dinner. Lately, the media had been making a fuss about me, and Evelyn personally drove over to Seaside Haven to pick me up, which left me feeling a bit flattered. "Jonathan told me you've been hurt by blackmailers before, so it's better to stay cautious," she said, her tone surprisingly warm. Her sudden shift in attitude caught me off guard. And I couldn't quite figure out what she was aiming for. It wasn't until we sat down at the restaurant that she raised her glass in a toast to me. "Miss Sophia, I've heard some misleading things about you before, and I ended up misunderstanding you, causing you trouble and hurt. I want to formally apologize." I immediately understood that Cecilia must have said something bad about me to Evelyn, leading her to have a biased first impression of me. I wasn't the type to make a big deal out of things, so I lifted my glass and clinked it with hers. Throughout the dinner, I realized Evelyn was genuinely easy to get along with. She was straightforward and candid, and we hit it off well. Unable to hold back, I asked her, "What made you change your mind about me?" Evelyn smiled lightly and replied, "I've seen the comments from the online harassment, and most of them were completely baseless. It's obvious someone is manipulating it from behind the scenes. Especially the ones claiming Jonathan treats you like my substitute honestly. It's laughable." She even chuckled as she said this. "I've known Jonathan and the Smith brothers since we were kids. Our parents have always been close. But Jonathan and I have always had a purely platonic relationship, just good friends," Evelyn continued, explaining that while their parents had tried to set them up for an arranged marriage, at the time, she wasn't interested in marriage, preferring to focus on her career. She felt that if marriage could bring advantages, that would be fine, but it wasn't a priority for her. I originally thought Jonathan felt the same way, but when I learned he didn't want an arranged marriage, I decided to let go, she said. She also mentioned that when she visited the set recently, she saw Cecilia acting like a diva, but it was the crew members who spoke highly of me, saying I was approachable and had good relationships with everyone. "So, I think things might not be what I originally thought," she added. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel moved. Kindness truly does breed kindness in return. After dinner, Evelyn had planned to call her driver, but as we were leaving the restaurant, we bumped into Jonathan and the two Smith brothers. They had just finished their meal as well. I quickly apologized to Sam for the incident at his engagement party. It had been terribly rude of me. Sam gave a slight nod, assuring me not to worry, and after a few polite words, he left. Stephen invited us to his bar, but his gaze was locked on Evelyn the entire time. Noticing the awkward tension between the two, I couldn't help but speak up. "Evelyn's had a bit to drink. I think it's best if we head out now, I'll call her driver." Stephen immediately stepped in, saying, "No need, I'll drive her." The two of them seemed to get caught in some kind of back and forth, but I didn't pay much attention. I simply grabbed Jonathan's arm and pulled him away. Once in the car, I couldn't resist asking Jonathan, "Is there something going on between them?" Jonathan lazily held my hand and toyed with it. "Can you focus more on me?" "They're not your concern," he added. I glanced at him and softly asked, "Aren't you tired of it?" He froze for a second, then raised the partition between the front and back seats. Reaching over, he pulled me into his arms, his voice laced with a dangerous smile. "Tired of me, Sophia? I think you're getting bolder and bolder." I smiled, my eyes curving, and hooked my arms around his neck. "Not tired at all. I'll never get tired of it, not for a lifetime." Jonathan didn't say anything else, just casually smiled. But that night, in the bedroom, I gasped for breath all through the night, with some sobs mixed in. 3 days later, the PR team officially released a statement, completely clearing up all the rumors about me, with clear and irrefutable evidence listed for each accusation. Meanwhile, several scandals about Cecilia were also exposed. Not only had she been in an affair, but she was also linked with David. Even more shocking was the revelation that she had played a role in connecting several young women with the industry's darker sides. These accusations were well organized and the evidence undeniable. Cecilia's reputation was beyond saving. I watched the full video of the fight that had caused such an uproar, and finally realized one thing: Evelyn had it really rough. I had never understood how she ended up in the scuffle. After watching the video, I realized that Cecilia had dragged her in front of me, forcing her to take several slaps in my place. I couldn't help but laugh and sent her a message apologizing. The public opinion on social media completely reversed. People who had once criticized me were now leaving apologies. I wasn't particularly interested in the shifting opinions, but while scrolling, I came across a photo. In the photo, I was wearing a thin dress, suspended by a wire, and Jonathan stood beside me with a coat in hand, looking at me with gentle eyes. The photo was blurry, clearly taken a long time ago, when I was still a bit naive. The caption read, "I'm dying, turns out Jonathan has been crazy about Sophia for 2 years." Looking at the photo, memories flooded back to me. It was during my first year in the industry, a winter with temperatures below freezing. I had to shoot outdoor scenes, wearing a thin dress. To create a flowing effect, they used a wind machine, and I spent every day with frozen hands and feet. After a few days, I developed a high fever and groggily called Jonathan. He immediately rushed over that night. The next day, when I didn't have any scenes, he stayed with me in the hotel, taking care of me all day. Once my fever subsided slightly, I had to continue shooting the remaining outdoor scenes. As a newcomer, I didn't want to delay the progress of the production, and Jonathan didn't complain. Every day, he stood on set holding a coat, waiting for me. After each shot, he wrapped me up in his coat, keeping me so warm that I almost cried. He stayed with me for 3 whole days, until the outdoor scenes were done, before he left. That winter was incredibly cold, but all I remembered was his dry, warm embrace. I stared at the photo for a long time, unable to stop myself from smiling, and quietly saved it. The news heat gradually died down, and everything seemed to return to normal. My work continued, and my next schedule was to appear on a talk show. While getting my makeup done backstage, the fire alarm suddenly went off, and the sharp smell of smoke began to spread. The scene immediately became chaotic. In the crowd, I was shoved and lost my balance. As I was about to run toward the exit, someone suddenly pulled me into a small storage room. It was Cecilia. She was wearing a hoodie, looking utterly haggard, with bruises at the corner of her mouth. I glanced at her hands discreetly, but saw no weapons. It seemed she just wanted to talk. "You must be feeling so smug right now. Resources, fame, love all going smoothly for you," she said, blocking the door. I leaned against a cardboard box, making sure to keep a safe distance from her. "Nothing to be smug about," I said flatly. "Work, life, it's just like this, right?" Suddenly, Cecilia laughed, tears welling up in her eyes. "You probably don't remember me, do you?" She looked at me, her voice hoarse. "I was one of the girls sent to accompany clients. But you were taken by Jonathan. And I was left in that room forever. I often wonder, if Jonathan had chosen me instead, would things have turned out differently? Do you know how jealous I am of you? Why do you get to have everything, while I have to endure all of this? Why? I just wanted to earn some money for my brother's medical fees. I was momentarily stunned when I heard that. I remembered that night there were indeed a few girls in the private room. But I never had the chance to clearly see who they were. I quietly watched her, softly asking, "How is your brother?" Cecilia raised her head and wiped away a tear. "He's dead. Before I could even make a name for myself, he passed away from his illness." I looked out the window, sighed softly, and said, "I'm certainly a bit luckier than you." Without meeting Jonathan, I might not have even been able to stick with acting. But one thing I can be sure of is this: once you're stuck in the mud, unable to save yourself, no matter what, I would never pull anyone else down with me. Cecilia was silent, her gaze drifting. I wondered if she was thinking about those girls she had helped trap, the ones who were forever stuck in that small room. "What do you know?" Her voice suddenly turned sharp. "If I didn't do it, I would have been discarded long ago, left to rot without anyone knowing where I am." I didn't answer. Instead, I calmly made my way toward the door. Cecilia watched me but didn't stop me. I opened the door and was about to leave when I heard her let out a low sigh from behind me. "People's fates, they're just different." I stopped and turned to look at her. She dropped an envelope by my feet. The wind outside lifted her long hair. Her eyes were red, but she smiled wildly. "Sophia, I really hate you. But you're the only one who would help me. See? Sometimes the world is just this absurd. I don't regret it. I won't reflect. I just hope those bastards die." With that, she jumped off the box. I stood frozen in place, only able to silently shed tears. Cecilia is dead. The envelope she left behind contained a long list. It documented all the people involved in the flesh trade over the years. From predatory contracts to forced transactions, an entire industry chain laid out in clear detail. I called the police and made the list public, with Cecilia's name attached. The case quickly garnered attention from all walks of life. The police initiated an investigation, and those involved were gradually held accountable. Many people began to mourn Cecilia. But there were also many who didn't condone her actions. I didn't follow up on it any further. I had never experienced her pain, so I couldn't judge whether her actions were right or wrong. But I hoped that the girls who had once been trapped in those small rooms would finally be able to gain their freedom. Life and work continued on as usual. 6 months later, I won the Best Actress award for a film. What surprised me was that the person who presented the award was Jonathan. As soon as he appeared, the entire venue erupted in excitement. Not just the fans, but even the actors and hosts in the audience were making wild hints at me. He handed me the trophy, his eyes smiling. "Congratulations, Miss Sophia. I wish your acting career a future full of success." Another round of enthusiastic applause erupted. I took the trophy, my eyes slightly misty, and paused for a moment before beginning my acceptance speech. As I left the stage, I walked down with another male actor. Perhaps out of habit, he instinctively reached out to assist me down the stairs. Jonathan shot him a glance, and the actor immediately retracted his hand in surprise, quickly walking ahead. I couldn't help but laugh as I walked over to Jonathan, joining him to leave. Teasing him, I said, "Why'd you scare him like that?" Jonathan put his arm around my shoulder, looking unfazed. "What do you mean scare him? I just thought his hands were pretty pale." Once we sat back down, I secretly checked the trending topics on social media. Sure enough, my account was blowing up. The actor's retracted hand had been turned into a GIF and was being shared widely. Some keen-eyed netizens noticed that the ring on my finger wasn't the style sponsored by the brand, and began speculating whether Jonathan had already proposed. The truth was, we had already gotten married. Just last week. I woke up one day to find a new ring on my finger. But it wasn't the couple ring I had bought before. I couldn't help but ask him, "Why didn't you use the one I bought?" After all, it's the only pair of rings like that in the world. Jonathan, leisurely fastening his watch strap, replied, "This one's the only one of its kind in the world too." "Don't like it?" "Actually, I liked it very much, but I teased him on purpose. If I don't like it, can I change it?" He chuckled lowly, gently pinching my waist. "If you try a bit harder today and grow 10 more fingers, I'll fill them all up for you. Little gold digger." That day, I was delayed by some work, and the next morning, Jonathan took me to the notary to officially register our marriage. After the award ceremony, Jonathan draped his jacket over my shoulders, his expression tender, a smile in his eyes. "Let's go home, Mrs. Brooks."
Lately, the little kitten's temper has been growing, and she's been showing her teeth more and more. At least she's gotten comfortable. Compared to the cautious, I'll-waist-string-to-please person she was before, this new version is much more interesting. The only thing that's been bothering me is how deeply she gets into her roles. Her mind is full of those awful first love stand-in cliches. Looks like I'll have to be more careful about the scripts I pick for her in the future. After 3 months of being away, I finally came back home. Just as I was about to say a few words, Stephen pulled me aside for a heart-to-heart. So annoying. He's been in love with Evelyn for 20 years, and still can't say those 4 words. No wonder his brother's married, and he's still single. I had planned to nudge him along with the fake news of a marriage alliance, and let the rumors spread. I didn't know what progress he had made, but I nearly got myself caught up in it too. The little kitten got so angry that she threw the ring and ran off. By the time I picked up the ring and went after her, she was nowhere to be found. The only call I got was her telling me to move out. At least she knew to kick me out rather than suffer in silence. I had planned to go find her right away, but of course, the project in Germany hit a snag, so I had to fly out overnight to handle it. Before I left, I reminded my assistant, Susie, to keep a close eye on her. Susie is usually all talk, but she's pretty useful when it counts. The moment the scandal broke, she arranged for a bodyguard to be nearby. I watched the full video of that day and looked into Cecilia. I knew she had something else up her sleeve, so I decided to hold off for now. But the little kitten was definitely going to be crying in the hotel secretly. This is a tricky situation. By the time I finally stabilized the situation, it had already been a few days. I flew back to the country immediately and couldn't help but sigh. These people are ridiculously inefficient. Looking at her fans, their combat effectiveness was a mess. They were being overwhelmed by the haters, and I still had to step in personally to fix this minor issue. I suggest all her fans enroll in a class, come over to me, and learn how to handle haters. As for the contact info that was still in her phone's blacklist, I could only reach out to her through social media. Thankfully, we were able to meet in the end. The little kitten's eyes were so swollen from crying. In the past 3 years, I hadn't seen her cry like this. I nearly couldn't resist and was about to go comfort her, but I managed to hold myself back. She won't get over this unless we clear everything up one by one. She'll keep it in her heart. Seeing her act both guilty and defiant, looking like she wanted to argue but was actually in love, it was both cute and frustrating. That's how she is. She listens to others talk so confidently but won't believe a single word I say. It's my fault too. I've spoiled her, and her temper keeps growing, and in the end, it all gets directed at me. But as long as I can calm her down, it's fine. The little kitten is still the cutest when she's smiling.